We've all seen it in the movies. A character closes their eyes, the heart monitor flatlines into a single, haunting note, and the screen fades to black. But for those of us sitting on the edge of our seats, or the edge of our beds at 2 a.m. wondering about our own mortality, that fade to black isn't enough. We want to know what happens when the credits don't roll. There is a massive misconception out there that death is like hitting a cosmic pause button, that you enter a long, dark sleep or a gray waiting room where you sit for a few thousand years with nothing to do. Or worse, some people think it's just nothing, a void. But if we look at what the Bible actually says, the reality is far more intense, far more immediate, and honestly, a lot more beautiful than a Hollywood script could ever capture. The second after you take your last breath on earth is not the end of your story. It is the moment the true story actually begins. You don't drift into a coma. You don't wander the earth as a ghost. You don't get recycled into a tree. The moment your heart stops, you are more awake, more aware, and more you than you have ever been in your entire life. Today, we're peeling back the curtain on the mystery. We're moving past the clouds and harps stereotypes and looking at the raw, biblical reality of what happens the very second you cross the finish line. Why are we so obsessed with this question? Why does the thought of the second after make our palms sweat? It's because death is the only thing every single person watching this video has in common. It is the 100% guaranteed appointment we all have to keep. For a lot of us, especially if you're just starting your faith journey or you're coming back to the church after a long time away, death feels like a giant question mark. We've been told, don't worry about it. Or we've been scared into thinking God is just waiting there with a giant checklist to point out every mistake we made in 1997. This uncertainty creates a low-level anxiety that hums in the background of our lives. If you don't know where you're going, you can't be fully present where you are. When we understand what happens the second after we die, it changes everything about how we live today. Turns our fear into fuel. Turns our grief into hope. If we realize that death isn't a cliff we fall off, but a door we walk through, we can stop living in survival mode and start living in purpose mode. We need to talk about this because the second after is the ultimate perspective shifter. It reveals what was actually valuable and what was just noise. To understand this, we have to look at the words of Jesus and the early apostles, because they spoke about this transition with a shocking amount of certainty. First, let's look at a moment of extreme high stakes. The crucifixion. Jesus is hanging on a cross, and next to him is a criminal. This man is literally minutes away from death. He says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replies in Luke 23 verse 43, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Notice the word today. Jesus didn't say, "In 2,000 years when the world ends, you'll see me." He didn't say, "After you spend a few centuries in a waiting room." He said today. The Greek word used for paradise here is paradisos, which literally refers to a grand park or a king's garden. The second that criminal breathed his last, he wasn't in a hole in the ground. He was walking in a garden with the King of the universe. Next, we have to look at the words of Paul in 2 Corinthians 5 verse 8. Paul was a guy who faced death constantly, shipwrecks, beatings, prison. He wrote, "We are confident, I say, and would prefer to be away from the body and at home with the Lord." In the original language, this carries the weight of a binary switch. There is no middle ground. To be absent from the physical body is to be present with the Lord. The transition is instantaneous. There is no travel time. There is no cosmic taxi ride. It is a relocation of the soul that happens faster than a blink. Finally, let's talk about a story Jesus told in Luke 16 about a rich man and a beggar named Lazarus. When they die, the Bible describes them as being immediately conscious. They could feel, they could recognize others, and they could remember their lives on earth. This tells us something vital. You will still be you on the other side. You don't lose your identity. You don't become a drop of water in a cosmic ocean. You are a unique person, created by God, and that identity carries straight through the veil of death. The Bible describes this immediate state as a temporary home before the final resurrection. But the key takeaway is that it is a place of conscious, personal fellowship with God. Think about it like this. Imagine you are boarding a flight from New York to a beautiful tropical island you've never visited. The flight is long, the cabin is cramped, and maybe there's a bit of turbulence. You're tired, you're sore, and honestly, you're a little nervous because you've never been to this country before. But then the plane lands. The doors open. You walk through the jet bridge and step out into the terminal. The second you step out of that plane, everything changes. The air smells different. It's warm and floral. The light is brighter. The cramped feeling of the airplane is gone. Even though you haven't checked into your hotel yet, and you haven't started your vacation officially, you are in the country. You have arrived. Death is the jet bridge. The body is the airplane. It was the vehicle that carried you through this life. It got worn out, it got cramped, and eventually it had to land. But the you inside, the passenger, doesn't die when the plane stops moving. You simply step out. The second after you die, you aren't nowhere. You have just changed locations. You have stepped out of the clunky vehicle of a broken world and into the arrival's terminal of God's presence. You are still you, but the environment has shifted from one of decay to one of life. Now, someone might say, wait a minute. I've heard people say that the Bible calls death sleep. Doesn't that mean we just black out until the end of time? That's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people wrestle with. It's true, Jesus and the writers of the New Testament often use the word sleep to describe death, like when Jesus spoke about Lazarus or Jairus' daughter. But here is the catch. Sleep is a description of how death looks to the people left behind, not how it feels to the person who died. When you see someone sleeping, they look still, peaceful, and inactive. From our perspective on earth, a person who has died looks like they are sleeping. But just like when you sleep, your mind is often active in dreams, the Bible makes it clear that while our bodies sleep, wait in the ground, our souls are very much awake. Remember what we just looked at. Jesus told the thief, "Today you will be with me." If the thief was going to be asleep and unconscious for 2,000 years, that today would be a lie. Paul wouldn't say he preferred to be away from the body if it just meant being unconscious. He preferred it because it meant being with Jesus. You can't enjoy someone's company if you're knocked out cold. Sleep is the Bible's way of saying that death is temporary. Just like you wake up from a nap, God will eventually wake up our bodies in the final resurrection. But in the meantime, the real you is wide awake in the presence of God. So, how does this change your life tomorrow morning when you're drinking your coffee and heading to work? First, it kills the power of fear. Most of the anxiety in our world stems from a fear of loss and a fear of the end. But if the second after is actually an upgrade, if it's the moment you finally arrive, then death loses its sting. You can take risks for what's right. You can be generous. You can face health struggles with a weird kind of peace because you know that even the worst case scenario ends with you in the arms of God. Second, it creates urgency. If we are conscious the second after we die, it means our relationship with God matters now. We don't want to wait until the jet bridge to figure out if we know the pilot. This information should drive us to talk to God today, to lean on His grace today, and to make sure we've accepted the invitation to His kingdom. Lastly, it changes how we grieve. When we lose someone who followed Jesus, we aren't saying goodbye. We are saying, see you in a bit. We realize they aren't gone. They've just moved. They are more alive right now than they were when they were struggling in a hospital bed. You don't have to be afraid of the dark, because for the believer, there is no dark, only a transition into a much brighter light. Knowing that the second after you die is a moment of immediate conscious presence with God. How does that change the way you look at your biggest struggle right now? Does it make that problem look a little smaller? I want to hear from you in the comments. Is the second after something that has always scared you? Or does this biblical perspective give you a sense of peace? Let's talk about it. If this video helped clear up some of the fog around this topic, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and join our community of fellow travelers. We're all just trying to figure out what it means to follow Jesus in the modern world, and we'd love to have you with us. And if you're wondering, okay, but what about the final judgment? What happens after the waiting room? Then you need to watch this next video right here, where we break down the great white throne and what it actually means for you. Thanks for watching, and remember, your story doesn't end at the grave. It's only just beginning. We'll see you in the next one.